Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The record begins on a Thursday morning. For Simon Finch, order was not a preference. It was a defense mechanism. At 35, a history professor at Portland State University, he believed the world was a collection of primary sources. Of actions and consequences that could be catalogued, understood, and therefore, controlled. His life was a testament to this belief. He rose at precisely 6 o'clock. The alarm, a gentle chime he never allowed to repeat. The coffee beans were ground for exactly 22 seconds. While the water brewed, he would review his notes for the day's lecture on the fall of the Roman Republic. A topic he appreciated for its clear, brutal causality. He left his house before 7. The sun, a pale suggestion behind the persistent Oregon clouds. His wife, Lena, was still asleep. At 32, Lena Finch was a physical therapist at OHSU Hospital, a woman whose life was dedicated to mending the bodies of others. Her shifts were erratic, so she often slept in. Their 6-year marriage had settled into a rhythm of quiet intersections. He left early. She woke late. They would meet for dinner, exchange summaries of their days, his filled with academic debates, hers with patient small victories and setbacks. They would watch a program on television, and go to sleep. It was a marriage built on the foundations of a silent pact. No grand passions. But also, no grand conflicts. It was a stable, predictable structure. And Simon had convinced himself that this stability was a form of contentment. A low-grade hum of happiness. He was, of course, lying to himself. The silence in their Pearl District condo was not peaceful. It was a vacuum. A space where questions one was afraid to ask went to die. But over the past 3 months, a new variable had been introduced into their carefully calibrated equation. Lena began to speak more and more of her Aunt Beatrice. Her mother's older sister, who lived alone in an old craftsman house in Selwood. According to Lena, Aunt Beatrice had suffered a nasty fall. It left her with mobility issues that required constant assistance. Groceries, chores, doctor's appointments. Lena was now responsible. She claimed she visited 2 or 3 times a week, usually in the afternoons on her days off. Simon never questioned it. Caring for family was a noble act. A data point that fit neatly into his perception of Lena as a compassionate woman. His own memories of Beatrice were vague but pleasant. A kind, rosy-cheeked woman who served them tea and shortbread cookies during their rare holiday visits. He accepted Lena's story, because to question it would be to disturb the carefully constructed peace. He chose the safety of ignorance over the potential pain of truth. That morning, he kissed her forehead as she slept. Her breathing was even, her face untroubled. He saw a wife, a partner, a predictable part of his life's architecture. He did not see a stranger. His analytical skills, so sharp in the lecture hall, were utterly blind at home. He saw the routine, but he missed the rot, growing just beneath the surface. The day had started according to plan. His lecture on Tiberius Gracchus was well received. He fielded questions from bright-eyed students, his confidence bolstered by the familiar territory of historical fact. But at 1:30, an email arrived from the university administration. A minor electrical issue in the auditorium building. All afternoon classes were cancelled. Simon found himself with an unexpected surplus of time. He considered staying on campus to grade midterm essays, to lose himself in the comforting certainty of the past. Instead, a novel impulse took hold. He would go home. He would surprise Lena. Maybe he would cook dinner. The salmon recipe she liked. It was a sweet thought. A final, futile gesture from a man trying to resuscitate a marriage he didn't even know had flatlined. He drove his sedan back through the damp Portland streets, the city awash of gray and green. He parked in the underground garage of their building, a sleek, modern tower of glass and steel. It was almost 3 o'clock. As he walked through the lobby, Walter, the doorman, greeted him with a familiar wave. Walter was a man in his 50s, perpetually cheerful, a fixture of the building since they'd moved in. Professor Finch. Home early today, Walter asked, his smile genuine. An unexpected break, Simon replied, smiling back. Thought I'd take advantage of it. Walter nodded, his eyes crinkling. Then, in the kind of casual, offhand tone people use to make small talk, he dropped the sentence that would shatter Simon Finch's world. "Good on you," Walter said. "Your wife left with that fellow with the dark hair again today. Must be a relative, right? He always picks her up on the same days." Time stopped. The gentle hum of the lobby. The distant chime of an elevator. Faded to nothing. The smile on Simon's face became a rictus. A plaster mask, threatening to crack. The blood in his veins did not run cold. It turned to dust, leaving a hollow, aching void. "What, fellow?" The words came out strained. Barely a whisper. Walter, sensing the sudden shift in atmosphere, hesitated. His cheerful demeanor faltered. "Oh, you know. The tall guy, dark hair, drives that black SUV. I just figured he was a cousin or something, helping out with her aunt. He's here a couple of times a week, regular as clockwork." A couple of times a week. Regular as clockwork. The phrases echoed in the cavern of Simon's mind. Lena had always said she went alone. She drove their car. Always. The analytical part of his brain, the historian, began to connect data points he hadn't even realized he'd been collecting. The slight increase in mileage on the car. The vague answers she gave when he asked about her day with Beatrice. He forced a smile. That didn't reach his eyes. Yes. Him. Of course. He thanked Walter. And walked toward the elevator. His movements. Stiff. Robotic. His heart hammered against his ribs, an irregular, panicked rhythm. The professor's rationality had vanished. In its place was the primitive, primal insecurity of a man who suspects he has been made a fool. What fellow with the dark hair? The question was no longer a point of curiosity. It was an indictment. The elevator ride to the 12th floor felt like an ascent into a different realm. When he stepped into his apartment, the familiar space felt alien. It was no longer a home. It was a crime scene. The silence that had once seemed peaceful now felt suffocating, heavy with unspoken truths. He dropped his briefcase on the sofa. The sound was unnaturally loud. An accusation. He stood in the middle of the living room, his mind racing. Perhaps Walter was mistaken. Perhaps he'd confused Lena with another resident. It was a modern building, full of people, but Walter had said his wife. He had said her name. And the detail about the same days implied a pattern. Historien live for patterns. Why would Lena not mention a male cousin helping her? Why the secrecy? The word, again, hung in the air. A poisoned dart. It spoke of repetition. Of a routine he was not a part of. With trembling hands, Simon pulled out his phone. Years ago, they had installed a basic GPS tracker in their car. A simple security measure against theft. He had never once used it to check on her. He had never felt the need. It felt like a violation, a betrayal of the trust he thought was the bedrock of their marriage. Now, that trust was a ruin. He opened the app. His thumb hovered over the root history button. This was it. The point of no return. He was a historian, about to unearth a primary source document that would destroy him. He pressed it. He set the date range for the last 3 months. The screen populated with a web of blue lines. His eyes scanned the map of Portland. His breath caught in his throat. Not once. Not a single time in 3 months had their car traveled to Selwood, where Aunt Beatrice lived. Instead, dozens of trips 2 or 3 times a week, just as Walter had said, all led to the same address. A quiet, tree-lined street in Lake Oswego. An affluent suburb across the Willamette River. A neighborhood where they knew no one. He zoomed in, his heart pounding a frantic, painful rhythm. A single house. Why was she going there, repeatedly, always between 2 and 6 in the afternoon, on the very days she claimed to be helping her aunt? A wave of nausea washed over him. He sank onto the sofa, the phone feeling impossibly heavy in his hand. The screen did not just display a map. It displayed an itemized invoice of her deceit. Each pin on the map was a nail hammered into the coffin of their 6-year marriage. He needed the final piece of evidence. He picked up their landline, a device they rarely used, and with numb fingers, dialed Beatrice's number from memory. Each ring felt like an eternity. A hammer blow against his sanity. Finally, a cheerful, elderly voice answered. "Hello? Aunt Beatrice? It's Simon. Simon. What a wonderful surprise, dear. How are you? It's been ages. Simon closed his eyes. He kept his voice steady, a marvel of self-control. I'm well, thank you. I was just calling to check in. How have you been feeling? Since your fall. There was a pause. My fall? Oh, dear. I did slip on the porch steps, but that was last winter. I'm right as rain now. A little creaky, but aren't we all? The ground dissolved beneath him. So, you haven't needed help around the house lately? Another pause. This one longer. Laced with confusion. Help? No, not at all. Why do you ask? Has Lena been coming by to help you? The final question landed like a physical blow. Lena? Beatrice's voice was filled with genuine bewilderment. No, dear. I haven't seen Lena in months. Not since Christmas, I don't think. Is she all right? Has something happened? And there it was. The curtain had fallen. The play was over. Owen was no longer a husband, he was the sole, unwitting audience to a farce, in which he had been cast as the fool. He mumbled an excuse, something about a misunderstanding, wished her well, and hung up the phone. He sat there, holding the receiver, staring at nothing. The anger came first. A white-hot, suffocating wave that rose from his chest and choked him. Then came the humiliation. The feeling of being utterly played, of having his trust methodically dismantled, piece by piece, over a period of months. It was not a spontaneous mistake. It was a planned, deliberate campaign of deception. For a full hour, Simon Finch did not move. He sat on the sofa in the silent apartment as the gray afternoon light faded outside. The grief did not paralyze him. It focused him. It burned away the soft, trusting parts of his personality, leaving behind something sharp, cold, and metallic. He was a historian. And he was now faced with an undeniable historical fact. His marriage was a lie. And like any historical event, it needed to be documented, analyzed, and concluded. He would not scream. He would not break things. He would not confront her in a fit of rage. That would be messy, emotional, unpredictable. He would handle this the same way he handled his research. With methodical, surgical precision. He picked up his laptop. He didn't search for marriage counselors. He didn't search for articles on how to cope with infidelity. He typed, "Private Investigator Portland." He scrolled through the results, dismissing the flashy, overly dramatic websites. He chose a firm with a discreet, professional-looking site and stellar reviews. A calm, professional woman answered the phone. He was transferred to an investigator named Mr. Kane. Simon explained the situation in a flat, emotionless voice. He suspected his wife of infidelity. He had the address she frequented. He had the times. He needed proof, irrefutable proof. Mr. Kane listened without interruption. When Simon was finished, he spoke in a calm, businesslike tone. "I'll need 4 business days to gather a comprehensive file, photographic and video evidence, identification of the other party involved. I can begin surveillance this afternoon, but the full report will not be complete until next Tuesday." 4 days. It felt like a lifetime. But Simon knew that acting without a complete dossier would be a strategic error. "Fine," he said. "Proceed." He provided Mr. Kane with a description of Lena, their car model, and the likely times of her visits to the Lake Oswego house. They agreed on a fee, and the call ended. Simon hung up, feeling a strange sense of calm. He was no longer a victim adrift in a sea of pain. He was a client. Commissioning a weapon. The next 4 days were a masterclass in deception. A performance that would have earned him accolades on any stage. He went to work. He delivered his lectures with his usual clarity. He graded papers, his red pen slashing through weak arguments with renewed vigor. At home, he played the part of the devoted husband. He ate dinner with Lena. He listened to her fabricated stories about Aunt Beatrice's day. He would nod, ask appropriate follow-up questions, and feel nothing but a cold, clinical curiosity. He watched her lie. And a terrible, detached part of him admired the performance. She was flawless. There was no hesitation. No flicker of guilt in her eyes. She would come home, wearing a look of tired satisfaction, the look of someone who had spent the afternoon doing a good deed, and he would have to physically restrain himself from laughing at the sheer audacity of it all. Beatrice was in good spirits today, she'd say, unpacking groceries she had presumably bought on the way back from her lover's house. I helped her clean out the pantry. She sends her love. That's good to hear, he would reply, his voice perfectly even, while inside, a volcano of rage and sorrow churned. He was living inside a meticulously crafted lie. But now he was a co-conspirator, waiting for the perfect moment, to burn the entire structure to the ground. He wasn't just waiting for proof. He was gathering his strength. Steeling himself. For the final act. On the following Tuesday, precisely at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the email arrived. The subject line was stark and clinical, complete report, Lena Finch. Simon was in his office on campus. The door was locked. He sat at his desk, his hands clammy, and opened the message. It contained several attachments. A series of high-resolution photos. A few short video clips. And a 3-page written summary. He clicked on the first photo, and the air left his lungs in a silent gasp. It was Lena. Stepping out of their car in front of the house in Lake Oswego. Beside her stood a tall man with neatly trimmed dark hair and a confident posture, dressed in medical scrubs. They were laughing. Lena's hand rested on his arm with an easy familiarity that felt like a physical blow. A sequence of photos followed. The two of them walking to the front door. Him unlocking it. Them entering together. The timestamps showed they stayed inside for nearly 4 hours. One photo showed them emerging, wearing different clothes. He opened one of the video files. It was only 10 seconds long, filmed through the car window. It showed the man, Gideon, leaning over to kiss Lena before they got out of the car. She returned the kiss. Deeply. Her hand moving to the back of his neck. Simon felt a sharp, physical pain in his chest, as if a shard of ice had been driven into his heart. He clicked open the written report. Mr. Kane had been thorough. The man was Gideon Wells, 32, an orthopedic surgeon's assistant at OHSU, the same hospital where Lena worked. Single. The house in Lake Oswego was his. A social media search revealed they had been connected online for nearly a year, but their public interactions were minimal, a clear attempt at discretion. The report even included recovered text messages, methods of which Simon preferred to remain ignorant, filled with affectionate declarations and plans for their next tryst. Simon closed the laptop. He wanted to scream, to shatter the window, to weep. He did none of these things. He took a long, slow breath, compartmentalized the searing pain, and began to plan the final confrontation. He came home early that afternoon. This time, deliberately. He knew Lena's shift ended at 6. He plugged a flash drive containing the evidence into the large television in their living room. He created a slow-moving slideshow of the most damning photos. The kiss. The laughing. Them entering the house. Them leaving in different clothes. He turned the television on, muted the sound, and sat on the sofa, directly opposite it. Then, he waited. At 6:30, he heard her key in the lock. Lena walked in, a tired but placid smile on her face. "Hi, honey. Long day." She stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes locked onto Simon's face. His expression, a mask of cold neutrality. Then her gaze drifted to the television screen behind him. The color drained from her face. She went utterly pale, her purse slipping from her numb fingers and falling to the floor with a soft thud. The photos cycled on the screen. Silent. Undeniable. Brutal. "Sit down, Lena," Simon said. His voice was calm. So devoid of emotion, that it frightened even him. She stood frozen for a moment. A cornered animal. Then, slowly, she walked to the armchair and sank into it, her hands trembling in her lap, her eyes fixed on the images of her betrayal. "Simon. Don't," he interrupted, his voice low but sharp as a razor. "Don't speak. Just listen." Tears welled in her eyes. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze pinning her to the chair. "For 3 months, you have left this home, and driven to Lake Oswego, to sleep with Gideon Wells. For 3 months, you have come home, looked me in the eye, and lied about caring for Aunt Beatrice. I called her, by the way. She hasn't seen you since Christmas." Tears began to stream down her face. "Simon, please. Let me explain." A humorless laugh escaped his lips. "Explain. Explain what?" That you've been having an affair with a colleague in his house while I'm at work? That you invented an illness for your own aunt to create an alibi? That you lied to my face every single day, for 96 days? I didn't plan for it to happen, she sobbed. It happened. We worked together, we started talking. I was lonely. Lonely? Simon stood up, the anger finally breaking through his icy composure. You were lonely. Then why didn't you talk to me? Why didn't you say, Simon, I'm unhappy. We need to fix this. But you didn't. You chose to lie. You chose to betray me. You chose to make me a fool. She stood as well, reaching for him. I still love you, Simon. I swear. It was a mistake. He pushed her hands away. 3 months is not a mistake, Lena. 3 months is a choice. You chose him. You chose this. Please, she begged, her voice breaking. We can fix this. I'll end it with him. Today, I swear. Simon shook his head, his eyes burning but dry. No. It's over. I've already consulted an attorney. You'll be served with divorce papers by the end of the week. The finality in his tone made her collapse. She dropped to her knees on the expensive rug, sobbing uncontrollably. Simon. Don't. Please don't do this. He picked up his briefcase from the sofa. I want you out of here by tomorrow evening, he said, his voice flat. I'll be staying at a hotel. When I return, I expect you and your things to be gone. The condo stays with me. The down payment was from my inheritance. Our prenuptial agreement is quite clear on that. He walked to the door, then paused, turning back to look at her one last time, a crumpled figure on the floor. And Lena? The next time you decide to invent a story, you should choose your details more carefully. A man like Walter in the lobby notices patterns. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with a new, dawning horror. He didn't wait for a response. He walked out and closed the door behind him, the soft click of the lock sounding as final as a gavel in a courtroom. In the days and weeks that followed, Simon Finch did not operate on impulse or rage. He operated with the cold, clear intelligence of a historian documenting the end of an era. He wasn't just ending a marriage. He was salting the earth where it had once stood. First, he had his lawyer send a discreet but detailed package to the Human Resources Department at OHSU Hospital. It contained copies of the key evidence photos, Gideon's identity, the timeline along with a formal letter detailing a pattern of inappropriate behavior between 2 employees. He framed it as a concern for professional conduct, suggesting such a relationship, built on deception, could compromise the workplace environment. HR launched an internal investigation. Within 2 weeks, Gideon Wells was quietly reassigned to a different department on a different shift schedule, effectively isolating him from Lena. The hospital grapevine did the rest. The humiliation was quiet, but pervasive. Second, he did not hide the truth. When friends, both his and mutual, called to ask what was happening, he told them the unvarnished facts in a calm, level voice. Lena was having an affair with a coworker for 3 months. She lied about caring for her sick aunt to cover it up. We're divorcing. It was simple, direct, and devastatingly effective. There was no room for ambiguity. Sides were chosen. And nearly everyone sided with him. Lena's life imploded. She sent him a barrage of texts, emails, and voicemails, each one more desperate than the last. She begged for forgiveness. She swore Gideon was gone from her life, that she had made the biggest mistake of her life. Simon blocked her number. All communication was routed through his lawyer. The divorce was swift and brutal. With no children and a prenuptial agreement, there was little to contest. The condo was sold. Simon kept the larger share, as stipulated. Their shared belongings were divided with cold efficiency. Less than 6 months after that Tuesday afternoon, their marriage was legally dissolved. As soon as the scandal at the hospital broke, Gideon Wells vanished from Lena's life. He wanted no part of the fallout, no public connection to the messy divorce. The great, passionate love that had supposedly justified her betrayal evaporated at the first sign of genuine consequence. He blocked her calls. A year later, Simon was living an hour south of Portland, in Corvallis. He had accepted a tenured position at Oregon State University, seeking a new environment with fewer ghosts. He had methodically rebuilt his life. He started seeing a therapist to process the betrayal, not as a sign of weakness, but as a logical step in his recovery protocol. He took up hiking in the vast Oregon wilderness. And, to his own surprise, he began dating Tessa, a university archivist he met at a faculty event. It was new, and light, and devoid of the suffocating silence that had characterized his last years with Lena. Lena remained in Portland, but her life was a shadow of its former self. She kept her job, but the atmosphere at the hospital was toxic. Colleagues were polite, but distant. Whispers followed her down the hallways. She had lost most of their mutual friends, who saw her deception as unforgivable. Her relationship with her own family was strained. She was an island of her own making. One evening, Simon was having dinner with Tessa at a restaurant overlooking the Willamette River. He happened to glance at his reflection in the dark glass of the window. He saw a man who was smiling. A real, unforced smile. The smile of a man who was light, free from the immense weight he had carried for so long. In that moment, he knew he had survived. The betrayal no longer defined him. He was just Simon Finch. Historian. Hiker. A man who had loved, been deceived, had suffered, and had, against all odds, found himself again. The narrator does not state whether this was the freedom of true healing, or the hollow lightness of a man who had successfully carved out a part of his own soul, to ensure his survival. The record simply shows a man who won his war, leaving nothing but scorched earth behind him. And in his new, ordered life, that was enough. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next.